Do you know the number of students in elementary, junior high, and high school in the Busan area who happen to be North Korean refugees? According to some statistics, in total there were 69 students back in 2013, 83 in 2016, and 93 just last year. The number of North Korean refugee children is increasing every year, but it seems there are difficulties for them because of the lack of educational support. And for this reason, in 2014, the Changdaeun School for North Korean Refugee Children opened its doors, the first school of its kind outside the Seoul metropolitan area. Located in Gangso-gu, the school offers housing, full tuition support, as well as allowance for the kids. A school and education solely for North Korean refugee children. You're tuned into The Interview, a program here at BeFM, Busan 영어 방송, where we get to talk with some of the most interesting people we've invited onto our show, sharing their stories and learn from people from all walks of life. And today, we're going to be talking with somebody on the topic of education for North Korean refugee children. It's Wednesday, May 23rd. I'm Daniel Shin. Let's get started with our show. Our first track of the day by The Hollies. He's not heavy, he's my brother. The Hollies with He Ain't Heavy, He's My Brother. I'd like to welcome everyone once again to The Interview, a show here at BeFM, Busan 영어 방송. We are a Monday through Saturday program on at 11 a.m. going to noon. And during the hour, I get to sit down with some of the most interesting people the city of Busan has to offer. I get to hear their stories as well as get on a more personal level with them. And it's through our various interviews with Busan's leaders of politics, economy, society, culture, and the arts, as well as regular citizens living in this day and age, we get a look into what modern-day Busan is all about. And of course, here on our program, we love to hear from you, our listeners. As you're tuning into the conversations we are having here in the studio, there are plenty of ways that you can participate in them as well. You could send us text messages via pound 9050. That's 샵 9050. It will cost you 100 won. You could chat with us on our Kakao Talk. If you search for BeFM, Busan 영어 방송 in your plus friend option, you could add us onto your friends list and we could chat on there. If you haven't already done so, download our free smartphone application. Search for BeFM, Busan 영어 방송 in whichever app store you use. Download our app, which is free. Listen to us live while leaving messages on our app comment board. And if you're in front of your computer, log on to our website. Go to www.befm.or.kr. Click on The Interview. It'll take you straight to our program's webpage, and you could leave us any and all messages, questions, or comments on our message board. Once again, you're tuned into The Interview here at BeFM, Busan 영어 방송 90.5 FM and 103.3 FM in Gijang, Cheongwan, and Noksan. Moving right along, let's get to the important part of our program. Now, the topic of today's interview is going to be on education for North Korean refugee children, and we've invited onto our program a very special couple to speak on the subject. Let's go meet them. All right, folks, today we are joined here in the studio by Lou and Lisa Gallo, who are husband and wife. They are teachers at the Changdaeun School for North Korean Refugee Children, as well the founders of NK Missions. 자, 오늘은 장대현 학교 Lou Gallo 그리고 Lisa Gallo 선생님 모셨습니다. Welcome to our show, and it's a pleasure to have you.
It's great to be here. Thank you for having us.
Yes, thank you.
Now, would you take this time to introduce yourselves to our listeners? I gave a little introduction, but you guys could, introduce yourself a little bit more for our listeners.
Sure. So my name is Lou Gallo, as you mentioned, and we've lived in Busan for a little over 3 years, going on 4 years now. But we both were born in New York, out on Long Island. We went to high school together, and probably the most interesting thing about us is that we are high school sweethearts. And we've been married now almost 39 years.
Okay, but knew each other way before that, so
yes,
even more number of years knowing each other. Gotcha.
Hi, my name is Lisa Gallo, and he pretty much covered it.
Once again, just welcome to our program.
Thank
It's
you.
a pleasure to have you. Now, before becoming teachers at the Changdaeun School here in Busan, I believe you two, as I mentioned, founders of NK Missions, right?
That's
So
right.
could you tell us a little bit about your organization and how you guys got to create such a thing?
So while after marriage and then living in New York for a number of years, we had moved to Northern Virginia. And as our children got older, our youngest daughter actually became interested in Korean things.
Mm-hmm.
And so we, through that, there's a longer version, but through that, we started working with North Korean defectors in the Washington, D.C. area.
Mm-hmm.
And as a result of seeing some of the burdens that they faced in transitioning into a free society, we really felt like we wanted to develop a place where they could come and we could help them with things like job training and language training and just help them through practical things, maybe get local businesses and local churches to help out as well. So that was really the original idea behind NK Missions. So when this opportunity came to come here to Korea for a year and work at the school, we thought, well, we'll come for 1 year of training, actually live amongst them, and then go back and have a better understanding of the needs of North Koreans. But there seemed to be another plan. Here we are almost 4 years later. So
It's an interesting story because it actually started with our daughter at the time. She was 15 years old, and she started to become interested in Korean things. So like K-pop, K-dramas. And
Right.
Lisa and I thought, well, this is probably a teenage phase, and it'll pass. So it just seems to be pretty harmless. And then it didn't pass, and she got more interested in the culture and then interested in the language. And in our church, I was a pastor in Northern Virginia. There were a number of Koreans who lived there and who were in our church. One of them had a connection with somebody who was helping a North Korean refugee.
Okay.
And she brought him over from Seoul. He was a 20-year-old young man. But he was up in Maryland. We were in Northern Virginia, and he was just sitting in an apartment. The woman who brought him over had a business that she had to run. So anyway, through somebody in our church, they just put out an email saying, hey, there's this North Korean refugee young man who's up in Maryland just sitting there. Does anybody want to have him for the summer, do things with him and stuff like that? So Lisa at first thought, well, that's kind of maybe not very comfortable for us. We have a young daughter and have this North Korean refugee. Like, who is he? What is
Right.
Seems dangerous, actually.
Yeah, I had no idea really what to expect. The only framework I had for North Korea was what I saw in the news
Right.
and the leader of North Korea, and I kind of lumped all the people together with that mindset. So I was quite closed in my thinking, and I thought, well, I don't know if that's even safe, So I thought, well, I'll pass this email on to friends who have sons. We only have a daughter now at home. So, but then in the morning, I just had a very strong impression that we were supposed to do this. So I shared it with Lou, and he agreed, and we launched out and went and picked him up.
Yeah, we picked him up. And so the ride from Virginia to Maryland is not very far. It's the Washington, D.C. area.
Right.
And so we drove up to Potomac, Maryland. We picked him up. He spoke no English. We spoke no Korean. But on the 30-minute car ride back to Virginia, we fell in love with each other. And I can't explain that.
We can't explain it.
We didn't communicate with words. Then, as a result of having him, we brought him to a meeting where he was going to be sharing his story. And we got to hear for the first time through a translator his story, and both Lisa and I were shocked at what we heard. He had escaped, been captured in China, repatriated, in prison, beaten, tortured. He escaped again. He got captured again in China, repatriated back to North Korea, beaten, in prison. He escaped again. It's a very strong young man.
Yes, indeed.
He was an orphan, so he knew if he stayed, it was just a death sentence. So he felt like he had nothing to lose.
Yeah, and so then he did get out. So we're hearing this, and for the very first time.
And the other two, there were two other defectors actually that spoke as well, and so we were hearing 3 stories that just rocked our world.
And this is your, I guess, first, like you mentioned, just reading about it in the newspaper,
That's
hearing
right.
about it, on news on TV, but you don't really get firsthand accounts
No.
of what they've been through.
And the human face, you know, the human experience. This is a real person standing in front of me, and I'm thinking these are three stories very similar. I don't think they're all liars. There's something here.
Yeah.
So it really affected us in a deep way. And you know, sadly, there's many sad stories in the world. There's many sad countries and things, but for some reason, North Korea just pierced our heart in a way that we can't explain.
Yeah, and so then we actually left that meeting changed, and we said to each other, we have to do something. And so because our church, by American standards, was a decent-sized church, about 800, 900 people. In Korea, that would be a very small church. But in America, that's rather large. And so we had a lot of resources. And so we did host a concert, and we raised funds to help an orphan escape from North Korea. And so we raised about $10,000.
We worked with an NGO.
Right.
Okay.
Worked with an NGO that was run by North Korean defectors.
Yeah, NK in USA was the name, yeah.
And so that orphan that we helped us to escape lives in America now.
Wow.
Yeah.
So we were encouraged, but we just kept working at it too.
Right.
Even though I was a pastor full-time and working, it was something that just had gripped our hearts. We had to keep working.
So I guess that's how you guys started NK Missions back home, back in the
right.
U.S.
That's right.
I guess what led you to come to Korea, specifically here in Busan, to continue on your work? I'm curious.
It's a great question.
Yeah.
So we were at a point in our lives where Lou had been a pastor for 26 years, and we were really considering transitioning to out of ministry. And he was actually thinking he would just go back into the marketplace, and we would spend our spare time working with NK North Korean refugees. So there's a woman who has been working on these issues for about 20 years. Her name is Suzanne Schulte, and we had started going to some meetings to learn more and gain information and hear about how we could practically help. And I just sent her an email one day, and I really don't know why I said this, but I said, we want to work with North Korean defectors. We may have more time on our hands, and we're willing to work either stateside or even in Korea. I hadn't even asked Lou.
You brought it up with him,
I
right?
didn't even bring it up with him. To this day, I think, what was I thinking, But sure enough, she wrote back, and she started telling us about this opportunity at Jungdaean School, and they were actually wanting native English speakers. And so when I first presented it to him, the one catch was you weren't able to be paid. It was a new school. Their funding was very limited, and so they were not able to pay us as teachers. We would have to come on our own. So at first, Lou kind of thought, we're crazy to even consider it, but by just many circumstances, we were able to get plane tickets to come on an exploratory trip. We couldn't shake the idea, even though Lou actually got a job in Virginia, but we felt like we have to at least explore this opportunity. So we came to Korea in October of 2014, and met the students and met the faculty of the school, met Chung Ho Lim, who is the principal and founder, and we just felt like we have to do this. So we thought, well, we'll come for 1 year. We'll come for 1 year, and we'll work with these students. We'll gain access to really learning the needs that North Korean refugees face, and that'll better prepare us to go back and work with our NGO. But here we are, 3.5 years later. We love what we do, and we love the students so much that we honestly can't imagine leaving right now. So I don't know what the long-term plan is. We don't really know.
Right.
Yeah, so.
Well, you're here. And
We
I
are
guess
here.
That's
We are here.
In the foreseen future as
That's
well.
right.
Now, with your work and passion for North Korean refugee children, how do you feel about the current situation of the two Koreas right now? Obviously, I'm sure you've been tuning into the news and see, I guess, a lot of people do say it as, going in a positive direction with the relationship of the two countries. Are there any hopes that you might have on this situation?
Well, it is a very interesting time to be living here in Korea with all of this going on. And actually, prior to the peace talks that started, of course, there were other talks that were going on that were much more threatening. A lot of our friends in America would are you okay? Are you safe?
Yeah, should you come home?
Should you come
Right.
home? Things like that. But we always said that the safest place to be is in God's will. And so we believe we're in God's will. That's the safest place to be. And so, but of course things are changing now, and there's talks of talks right now. Of course, Moon Jae-in met with Kim Jong-un, and there's some hope. But also on the other hand, this is kind of a cycle that's gone on for decades. And it happened with Kim Jong-un's grandfather and Bill Clinton. It happened with Kim Jong-un's father and George Bush. And now here it almost seems like he's taken a page out of the playbook of his grandfather and his father. But they are different players. They are different people. It's a different time. And so we are cautiously, prayerfully hopeful. We do pray every day at the school for peaceful reunification of the Korean Peninsula. And I say to the students as we talk about this with them, maybe this is what it looks like. Maybe this is what peaceful reunification looks like. I don't know, but let's keep praying.
Right, something that I'm sure is on a lot of people's minds, a lot of the students' minds as well at your school. Now, with focusing more on the work at the Changdaeun school, now it's inevitable, I guess, that defectors and refugee children, they experience a lot of difficulties when especially adjusting to life here in South Korea, especially the students. Now, how do you think our society needs to change in terms of helping with this group, especially the younger generation of these refugee children who come here and try to, live the life that they are given here?
Yeah, that's a big question. It's a great question. I was talking to one of our students actually about this and asking her about her experience, because when she first came into the country, she went to public school.
Okay.
And so I asked her, I said, what was that like for you to do that? And she's about 14 years old now. So when she came in, I think she was maybe 12 or so. So she said, well, I did fine with the academics part of it, but the thing that was hard is because I talked funny, and people then quickly found out that she was from North Korea and that she did experience a lot of social issues. And now, of course, middle school, elementary school children can be maybe some of the meanest people on the planet. And so she was experiencing a lot of that, and it was very, very difficult. However, we do have other students that come in. We have a 22-year-old student in our school. She had never been to school before. She came here, and so she's having to catch up and work very, very hard. And in fact, we just found out she passed her GED for high school. So this is something she's done in the past year and a half or 2 years.
It's incredible.
Has covered so much ground.
She had to pass the elementary and then the middle school, and she just passed the high school. By 1 point, she made it.
Wow.
Yeah, so she's worked extremely hard.
In fact, just yesterday, I was up with many of our students at Handong in Pohang, and we were talking to the school about a partnership with the university, and a lot of the students, some of the students are interested in attending there. Well, she's one of them, and I'm sitting there just looking at her as she's talking about her dreams and things like that, thinking, where would she be without Jangdaehyun School? Where would she be right now? She'd be, doing something that she, didn't like or was very hard on her, and here she is just having worked so hard, now looking at the possibility of going to university.
That's an incredible story, and especially with those, the children who had their backs against the wall, everything that, the odds were against them. And I'm sure they realized that too. That's why, given the opportunity to live life here in South Korea, I'm sure they're very grateful for it. And I see their drive and passion to make the most of what they're given here in school, here in Korea.
I would totally concur with that. Yeah, these are kids that could really wear the V for victim, but they don't wear that at all. They don't want that. They want to work hard and they want to make a difference. So we're so proud of them and how hard they work.
That's very encouraging.
Yeah.
Now, with your work here in Busan at Changdeon School, what do you think has been the most rewarding aspect as well? If you have, to this point, experienced any difficulties or even, disappointing parts about the job?
Probably one of the most rewarding things is to watch the transformation of the students. So you have to understand that for North Koreans, from a very early age, they're taught to hate Americans. They're taught to fear Americans. They literally have coloring pages from, say, like kindergarten that portray American soldiers with guns to the head of North Korean children. So they really fear Americans. So honestly, when we first arrived, we saw that fear. And many of them were, afraid to give us eye contact and were very timid. And but to watch the transformation for us in the last 3.5 years and the confidence, I remember early on trying to find out, what are some of your dreams? They would just have a blank stare. They had no dreams. They didn't know how to dream. And so just watching that transformation is one of the most encouraging things. And again, seeing how hard they work. I substitute taught in America, and to see middle and high school kids who thank me at the end of each class, thank me when I'm giving them homework. That's like otherworldly. That's not a normal experience.
Unheard of,
exactly.
Right?
But that's my experience. So that's been one thing that's very encouraging. Is there anything that you would say is the opposite or
disappointing?
Yeah.
Or just anything that you find difficult, because, we're human, right?
Well, yeah.
Sometimes we're frustrated and whatnot.
Right. So I had a friend who had a missionary friend, and I never thought I would be a missionary. And I thought I would be a pastor, I'd retire and then go work at Walmart or something and, just have a simple life, but
that's that's the American version of like a Lotte department store, like a Walmart.
Right. And so I never thought I would be a missionary, but a friend of mine said to me that their experience was that after 9 months, there's this like crisis that happens where you just feel like everything is so hard. And so I thought when we first got here, we had been prepared for the culture. We live in an area where there's a lot of Koreans. We had actually a ex-Navy SEAL, UDT SEAL, live with us
from South Korea. He was he was a student.
So he was in the Navy, but he was studying in America, and so we ended up adopting him like our son. We call him our Korean son, in which he's getting married in July. So we're pretty excited about that.
Kim-chan.
Kim-chan, right? So we were prepared, like the food. We were prepared for that. Some of the culture, I think coming here obviously was eye-opening about the culture. We had never lived in another country. We'd visited other countries, but never lived in another country. So getting to understand the culture. So that was very different than America. And then, they said after 9 months you'd have this crisis. Well, it wasn't 9 months for me. It was about 6 months.
Okay.
And all of a sudden, it just felt like I just can't do this anymore. Nobody speaks English, which is not true. A lot of people speak English. I can't read what's going on. Only 6 months in the country. I don't like the food. I just don't like it, and I want to go back. So that lasted about 2 hours, and then after that, it just got much better.
You just had to get it out of you, right?
I think so. And I just had to accept the fact that you live in a foreign country. Now there are a lot of foreign countries you could live in that are far worse than Korea. And so we don't feel like we have it difficult at all. In fact, we live in a beautiful area. We work with amazing people. I'm an English pastor at a English ministry, and we have a wonderful congregation. So, there's not much that's hard about this. We love the food. We love the people.
Yeah.
We love the culture.
I think we both wish we could speak Korean better. And, you know,
Yeah,
teaching English all the time doesn't give us a lot of opportunity to learn Korean. So I think that's hard, that after 3.5 years, we only can speak maybe taxi, you know, ask for the bathroom. Yeah, right. Shopping a little bit. And yeah, but that is one hard thing, especially even with the students. I would love to be able to speak on a deeper level, you know, Korean with them. But
those are hard things. They're not disappointing things. You know, the rewarding part of it far outweighs any difficulties.
Right. And just as, you know, people and as a married couple and as parents, of course, missing our family back home, having aging parents, having children, having grandchildren, you know, grandchildren born and we can't be there to see them. So that is definitely a hardship. But, you know, we do know that this is where we're supposed to be. So, you know, the benefits do outweigh, but there are those hard moments. You're right. You're right. So thanks for asking.
Now, obviously, now you're here. You've accepted the culture. You accepted your life here in Korea. But you had the opportunity to share a little bit of your life back home with your students. I do believe that you have taken trips to the U.S. with students of Changdaean School. Now, could you tell us of maybe your most recent trip to the U.S. with the students and, you know, how it went?
Sure. So, remind me of the date. It was
January 2017.
We at that point had 3 graduates from Changdaean School, and it was NK Mission's first senior trip to America with them. And so we raised all the funds for that trip and were able to take them. And so we took them to first the Washington, D.C. area. We were actually able to visit a Congresswoman's office, have a tour of the Capitol with them, and then we got to go to, you know, the sites in downtown Washington, D.C., and then we took a trip to New York and brought them to New York City. We were able to take them to actually a Broadway show, just give them a taste of, you know, the culture, and get them New York pizza, which is very famous, and things that we just wanted them to experience. And then we went to CBS, a radio station. They had a tour of the station that was wonderful, and they got interviewed by Voice of America, was it? Yeah, and then we went on to Long Island. And
to our hometown.
We were able to show them our hometown, where we grew up, and then we had some supporting churches there where they went and they spoke and gave, you know, their stories, and just the people fell in love with our students, and they did such a great job. So, you know, there's more details, but that's basically what we did with them. It was wonderful.
Yeah, we feel like it's an important part of what we do because, as Lisa mentioned, the they're taught at a very early age to hate America. And so to bring them to America and have them experience it firsthand, we feel like is important for them to grow. And particularly we live in a global age, and so to be able to understand the real America. And so we show them the good, the bad, but we hope we show them the real America, and they can make their own, you know, conclusions.
Right.
Not what they're taught, you know, through propaganda and so forth.
One of the students shared with me that really one of the most touching things for her was to see that actually Americans cared about North Korea. She was shocked by that and very, very affected by that.
I'm sure it was a huge eye-opener for the students.
It was, So we were so grateful. So we're actually gearing up this coming January. We're hoping to bring 7 students this
More
year.
than
We
double
have
the
7.
number.
Last year. So we're excited about that.
Yeah, so we just redid our website, and so the senior trip is featured on the website a little bit there, but it's not the biggest thing that we do. The biggest thing that we do now is moving into these other defector schools up in the Seoul metropolitan area. We've had the largest one talk to us about providing teachers to them, and the oldest school, defector school,
the first defector
about
school,
providing American native speaking teachers.
They'd like us to duplicate ourselves there.
That's
so
exactly
we're searching for the next Lou and Lisa to send to those schools.
But by far the most rewarding thing that we've ever done is what we're doing now.
Right, and maybe for some of our listeners, if they're interested in maybe helping support those types of projects and the work that NK Missions does, do you guys have a website or anything? Maybe some of our listeners can log on to and see what's going on with your organization.
Yeah, so just www.nkmissions.org. That's our website.
Yeah, thank you.
And you can actually contact us through there too.
Right. Thank you so much. Once again, continuing our talk with Mr. and Mrs. Gallo, teachers at Changdian School and founders of NK Missions. We're going to take a quick song break. We're going to play Avicii's Hey Brother. That was Avicii with Hey Brother. Once again, continuing our conversation with Mr. and Mrs. Gallo, teachers at the Changdian School as well as founders of NK Missions. We're going to move on to our street interview portion where our reporter has gone out to meet the citizens of Busan to gather some questions people are most curious about. The work that Mr. and Mrs. Gallo do as well with their work with North Korean refugees and children. Let's take a listen.
얘기를 기사로 본 적이 있는데요. 가족 모두가 부산에서 생활하고 계신 건지 또 고향이 많이 그리우실 것 같은데 향수병에 시달리신 적은 없었는지요?
요즘 남북 정상회담 이후에 북한에 대한 관심이 많아지고 있는데요. 학생들이 말하는 북한과 남한의 가장 큰 차이점은 무엇인가요? 또 학생들은 이런 좋은 분위기에 대해서 어떻게 생각하시는지 궁금합니다.
탈북 청소년이라고 하면 아무래도 조금 어두울 것 같다는 편견이 좀 있는 것 같은데요. 실제로 함께 생활하시면서 느끼는 학생들의 모습은 어떤지 궁금합니다.
얼마 전 스승의 날이었는데요. 가장 기억에 남는 스승의 날 선물이 있었는지 궁금해요.
요즘 일반적인 학생들은 연예인이 꾸민 학생도 많고 국제기구에 일하고 싶어하는 학생도 많고 그런데요. 장대현 학교 학생들도 비슷한지 가장 되고 싶어하는 직업은 무엇인지 궁금합니다.
부산에서 생활하면서 가장 좋은 점 그리고 가장 힘든 점 한 가지씩 꼽아주신다면요?
All right, so lots of questions from the citizens of Busan, most curious about the work that Mr. and Mrs. Gallo do. Now, there are a lot of questions. Let's get to our first question, see if Mr. and Mrs. Gallo can answer some of these. Our first question, this person was wondering, are you in Busan with your whole family, and I guess how much do you miss home?
So we're not here with our whole family. We have 5 children, 4 boys, and Alyssa, our daughter. However, our daughter Alyssa is here with us.
Okay.
And she's a student now at Kyongsung University. And she's studying musical performance, singing, dancing, acting. But we also have 9 grandchildren. And so we certainly miss our grandchildren a lot. We miss our kids too.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Something about grandchildren.
Indeed. So once again, yes, no matter how much you love it in a certain place, you do get homesick.
That's right.
Right. So our next question is, what do your students think is the biggest difference between the two Koreas? Obviously, you teaching at the Changdian School and getting the perspectives of children from North Korea. What do they think is the biggest difference so far with the two Koreas? And I guess with them, how do they like it here so far?
So the experiences that they, came out of will affect the way they, view, their current life. We have one student who actually lived quite a privileged life in North Korea. His father had a good job. His mother was a college graduate. And so he lived quite comfortably, actually, in North Korea. So his experience would be very different than some of our students who had to, go into the hills to try to, find roots or any kind of food that they could just to survive, So the stories their experiences and their stories are very varied. But I think the common thing is that they all feel very safe and loved here, especially in the school. The full-time teachers at Jangdaeun School do an amazing job, really becoming almost like second parents. And so some of our kids do have parents. Some of them have one parent. One young man is an orphan, has no parent. So socially, they seem to be, becoming like regular South Korean teenagers,
Okay.
So I heard today that, what's the group, K?
BTS.
Oh, BTS, yeah. So I heard all about
they're huge.
BTS today, going to be performing in America, their new song. So they're, in many ways, just like South Korean teens. So the first time that they left North Korea was the last time that any of them have been there. And about a year ago, they went on a trip to Baekdu Mountain, and some of the kids were actually able to look into to see the areas where their hometowns were.
Wow.
And there was actually a longing in some of their hearts to wish they could go back.
I'm sure.
I mean, it's a very mixed thing for them. They wish that they could go back to their hometowns, some of them. They wish that they could bring what they are experiencing here to the people of North Korea.
Yeah. Once again, no matter how much you like it in another place or a new place that you're at, there's always that longing that, for home,
That's
for
right.
your hometown,
That's
right? Thank you so much. Moving on to our next question. This person was wondering, what do you think are the biggest differences between children from North Korea and the ones here? And what are some public misconceptions about defectors and the refugee children? And I'm sure you've obviously spent a lot of time with North Korean refugee children and have seen a good amount of, just normal South Korean students and kids. What do you think is the biggest difference between the two?
Well, I think the biggest difference is gratitude. The students that we work with are some of the most grateful people that we've ever met. They are so eager to share what they have. It's not uncommon for us to come into school and find out that they had some snacks or something like that, either that they bought or somebody gave them, and them just being so eager to share them.
Right. They'll have one piece of candy and they'll want to break it in half to give me half of what they have. It's just incredible.
Yeah, and so, and some, a lot of times you forget what they've come out of because they're so grateful and they're so joyful, so happy. And then every once in a while you remind yourself of what they came out of, and then you just realize, wow, they're some of the most special people, I think, maybe on the planet.
Yeah.
One of the common comments that I've heard, people that have visited our school, they leave with the impression of how joyful our students are, and they're surprised by that. And I think that just speaks to the healing that has come through being in these type of schools. Our kids get, counseling, they get art therapy, they get very individualized attention to help them. And, some of the students have come from China and their first language is Chinese. So they're coming into a Korean school. So they're having to learn Korean and English. And so as you can imagine, it's just very difficult. But because of our schools, the way it's set up, we're able to really individualize the program and to help them grow and mature and flourish. So I think that's where the joy comes from, because they feel really heard and they feel helped and they see the progress that they're making and they're encouraged by that.
So I guess that's one big misconception, because when a lot of people think of North Korean refugees, especially children, they think, oh, they've had such a hard life there, such a difficult time maybe getting to Korea, to maybe even Busan. So I'm sure they only think of the hardships.
That's right.
They must be so sad. They must be so tired. But then they come to your school and see just how happy they are. It just goes to show you that no matter how much of a difficult time they might have had, the process of healing really does happen to each and every student.
Right. And that isn't to take away from the fact that they did have very hard. We have one student who actually had no hair when he came to our school. His hair had fallen out from stress. And now he has a beautiful full head of, black Korean hair, and so, but, they all have their scars, but, they're healing and growing. So.
Thank you so much. Moving on to our next question. Now, it was recently Teachers' Day here in Korea, and this person was wondering, have you gotten any presents from your students, obviously being teachers, and maybe the most memorable gift from past Teachers' Day that you've spent here in Korea?
So they did have a Teachers' Day at the school. Unfortunately, I missed it because I'm, as I mentioned, the English pastor at Suyungro Church.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was working that day.
First time you had to miss Teachers' Day.
The first time I missed it. But Lisa had an opportunity to go, and they did a hike on Gadak Island, and then had a program.
Yeah, they did a program for us that they made a video for us, a very funny video, and then they called us up individually and they presented a beautiful umbrella to us with the Jangdaean School emblem. But the most touching thing, honestly, for me was they hand wrote notes to each of us. And on the cards, just reading their little notes. It happened to be a day, Lou was gone that whole day, and so some days it can be a little lonely for me. I'm in the apartment. I don't really speak Korean. I go out into my town. I try to talk to people, but I'm very limited in what I can do. And so just the timing of getting those notes and seeing their sweet little expressions of gratitude really touched me. So I think those are the most cherished things for me, is just reading their little notes of appreciation. Yeah.
Moving on to our next question. This person was wondering, what do students at your school strive to be? What are some of their goals or their dreams? This person's curious.
Yeah, that's a great, very perceptive question. And as we mentioned, when we first got there at the school over 3 years ago, it was questionable, as to whether they even had any direction or any sense of what they wanted to do or what they wanted to be. And that has developed over time. And I'm not saying that's because we're there. I think the school, just because it was new, has matured. And so these students have goals, they have dreams, just like most students do. The thing that's different about these students is that their dreams and their goals are connected to what can they do to help North Korea.
Wow.
And so a lot of the way that they think and they process is, we expect reunification to occur. And what can I do when reunification occurs? And so we have, students who want to be engineers. We have students who want to be psychiatrists. We have students who want to be doctors. We have students who want to be diplomats.
Yeah, human rights lawyers.
Yeah, or human rights lawyers. Or we have one of our graduates is going to school now at Goshen University, and her program is all geared towards her opening an orphanage in North Korea when reunification occurs. So that her whole goal is to have an orphanage to care for, students or kids who don't have parents.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
And for these students to have that, mindset to always be thinking about not only their life here, but also their life back in, North Korea. And if reunification does happen, how am I going to help both sides?
Right.
That's right.
Yeah, that's
right.
exactly how they think.
It's amazing indeed. Moving on to our last question. This person was curious, what's the best as well the most difficult part about life here in Korea, or maybe specifically Busan? Curious.
Well, we love Busan.
But I have to say, though, the first 6 months in my hometown, we live in a little town, Shinhodong. I remember walking through the town, trying to, I learned 안녕하세요, trying to greet. Nobody would look at me. Nobody would answer me. Nobody would smile. And I thought, this is going to be very difficult living here. Nobody will, take my greeting, But over time, that town has become our little town. Now we have our own pharmacist. We have our own little supermarket, our farm, our doctor. Yeah, right. Our places, favorite places to eat. But I think the best thing, we love the food. We've come to really love Korean food. We actually miss it when we go back to the States, and we look for places to have Korean food.
But I become a Korean food snob when I go back to America and have Korean food. I'm like, it's not that good.
That's not how they do it, back where it's originally from, right?
That's right. Yeah. Yes, I mean, the difficult things probably would be the traffic in Busan, the drivers. It reminds me of when we are in New York City, very similar. And being away, obviously, from our children, our grandchildren, and parents is probably the most difficult, yeah.
We found our things, we found New York pizza. So, and then hamburger, we found a great hamburger over there. So we find our places like
when we're missing home,
missing
we have
Western food or something like that, and so we get an opportunity then to have a taste of home,
Right.
and so it makes it easier.
Yeah. And overall, really, the Korean people have been very warm and very kind to us.
Incredible. We've had people thank us for the Korean War. And Lisa had 2 uncles that were in the Korean War.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so it is particularly touching to us because it touches our family. But then to have people just saying thank you, and we've had North Korean defectors thank us, saying, well, at least half our country is free. So that's been...
But we've had, in an uncomfortable way, we've had South Koreans get out of their seat on the bus to thank us, or, bowing to us on the street, and we were like, no, but they're very grateful for the Korean War and, for America's contribution. I know not all Koreans feel that way, but we have had a very positive experience with that as well. So that's been very touching for us,
All right. Thank you so much. Hopefully that answered our citizens' questions. I'm most curious about the work that you do and your thoughts. Now, continuing our talk with Mr. and Mrs. Gallo, teachers at Changdaeun School for North Korean Refugee Children, as well the founders of NK Missions, we're going to move on to the last portion of our conversation with them. Do you have any future plans, especially, any upcoming projects by NK Missions or at the school that you guys want to tell our listeners about?
So we are in the process of expanding now. This is something that we didn't plan when we first got here, but has developed, where we have these other schools now are talking to us about providing Native American, and I think that's a key thing here is American because of what they've been taught as children, native English-speaking teachers. So we're in the process now of finding who would be a good fit for these schools, and someone who's passionate about North Korean issues and helping particularly students wanting to teach English, but it's more than that. It's mentoring. It's really being a role model to them, and so that's what NK Missions is becoming, this organization to help these defector schools that play such an important role in the defector students' lives. I really don't know how they could do it without these alternative schools, and so we want to help that. So that's the future, and then of course our trip to America in January, raising support for that. We're hoping possibly to have a concert here in Korea to raise awareness, but then also to raise support for this trip for our students.
Right. So maybe one more time, if you could give to our listeners the website so they could check out any and all updates and news about the work that you guys do.
Sure. It's www.nkmissions.org.
Thank you so much. Once again, that's going to do it for today's talk. We had Pastor Gallo and Mrs. Gallo speak with us, teachers at Changdaeun School and the founders of NK Missions. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to come speak with us and just the great work that you do. Thank you so much.
That's great.
Thank you
for having us.
Yes.
We are going to finish off our show with actually a song request from Pastor Gallo. He wanted to hear Yi Seung-cheol's The Day. So we are going to finish off the show with that. Thank you so much for tuning in. Hopefully you guys have a nice day. I'll see you back here tomorrow.